If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. 10 days out until the trade deadline, and this is the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman, joined by Jim Salisbury as always. And the Phils are in New York City for a 2-game series against the Yankees, followed by 8 in the division, all at home, those 8 games. But Jim, this 10-day stretch leading into the trade deadline, the Phillies have played in the month of July the way they knew they needed to convince the front office what they had to do ahead of the deadline. And at this point, it looks like buying is really the only way to go, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you're in it. And the object is to try to win the division, no matter how flawed it is. And they have, the team has their flaws and some holes, and it's incumbent on management to try to fill those because they're in it and they should try to stay in it. There are 10 days left. I guess if you nosedive, that could change the situation. But right now, their scouts are out there looking at pitchers. They're trying to add pitching. I hear a lot about center field, and that would be nice. But I think their priority is pitching. It needs to be pitching. I think that's their biggest weakness in 2 areas: the bullpen and the rotation back end. But I mentioned you could fall on your face over the course of 10 days. They've played very well in July. They've scored runs. They've made up ground in the standings. They need to keep it up. And, starting tonight, it's a tough series up in New York. I know it's only 2 games. Nola's coming back, has not, pitched in a couple weeks. So keep an eye on him. They're facing Domingo Germán, who they beat up in mid-June down here in Philadelphia. So and he's made his last few appearances out of the bullpen. So, they need to go in there and take it to Domingo Germán. Again, the Yankees are, they're lagging in the AL East standings because you got 2 teams really running away with it. But, they're still dangerous. They're very dangerous. In fact, they've won 7 out of their last 10, and their starting rotation in those 10 games has a sub-2 ERA. So a big challenge starting tonight for the Phillies in those 2 games. And then you come home with 4 against Atlanta and 4 against Washington. I mean, really tough schedule because those 2 teams are right on your heels. And I can tell you, those 2 teams have the same feeling that the Phillies have, that the division is winnable and that, go out and do it. So they're going to be coming hard after the Phillies. There is just no let up for the Phillies, and there hasn't been because they were buried early and just because they dug a hole early, I should say. And it's just the nature of this division that 4 teams are in it and 4 teams are gunning for each other. And these next 10 days, really leading up to that trip to Pittsburgh and the trade deadline, crucial and fascinating on multiple levels.
Yeah, the Yankees are a good example of how the Phillies, if they were in any other division in baseball, would be in a much different spot. The Yankees are a game better than the Phillies entering this series. The Phils are 2.5 games out in the NL East as they open this series, but they have 9 fewer wins than every division leader in the other divisions and on all 5 other divisions. So it's certainly fortunate for them that they reside in the NL East. You mentioned the Braves and the Nationals there. Those are also 2 teams that feel like they're in the race. Nationals, coming out of the All-Star break, have been hitting like crazy. Juan Soto is at the best place that he's been this entire season, especially from a power perspective. And we've already seen the Braves go out and make 2 trades, adding Jock Peterson and Stephen Vogt. So those are 2 teams that the Phillies face after this Yankee series that could also make some noise ahead of the trade deadline. Washington in particular, kind of an interesting team because they have some relievers at the back end of their bullpen and Brad Hand and Daniel Hudson that if they were to end up selling, that would boost the relief market. I don't know if they would make an in-division trade with the Phillies, but whether they buy or sell, and that's kind of how teams had to be looking at the Phillies earlier this month, whether they buy or sell was going to change really the trajectory of the trade market.
Yeah, no question. And the Phillies, they're looking to add. I would not call. I don't know that they're going to be an aggressive buyer. And I don't know that that's even a wise move. But, if you think about it, there are multiple ways to think about this thing. But they need pitching. And the one guy out there that I think I would make an aggressive buy on is Kimbrel, the closer for the Cubs. I don't know that I'd make an aggressive buy on a center fielder or even a position guy because of what it's going to cost me and how I'm going to have to dip into my future. And, when I look at the Phillies, their offense, sure, could use improvement, but I think they have enough when it's clicking. I just think pitching is their big flaw. Back end of the rotation and back end of the bullpen. And so when I say Kimbrel would be my one aggressive buy, he would immediately make the back end of your bullpen better. And, let me preface it by saying that he had, in 19 and 20, he pitched very poorly for the Cubs. He's kind of back where he used to be. Dominant now, all-star dominant, racking up big strikeouts, racking up saves here in 2021, having a great year. The reason I think he would be attractive is, and there's so much to this, but, he would solve a big problem at the back of your bullpen here in 2021. He would also, the back of the bullpen's been a problem now for years. It's an annual problem. He would solve it next year because he's under control with an option. I know the option's expensive at $16 million. But, you got guys like McCutchen and Herrera potentially coming off the books after this season. Guys like Moore and Anderson and Miller potentially coming off the books after this season. I think they can afford that, that $16 million to solve an annual problem, especially if he's going to pitch well. And here in 2021, when you have a need at the back of the bullpen and in the rotation, I wonder, Corey, if Kimbrel doesn't solve two issues for you. Because if you trade for Kimbrel, you're going to get a lockdown closer, something that's really they've missed and not had, and it's hurt them not having that. But you might also get your fourth or fifth starter if now you can transition Ranger Suarez back to the rotation. Now, I know that you might not want to jerk him around, and you might want to just slide him into the eighth or the seventh and have him help in the bullpen where he's done a good job so far. That's certainly logical and legitimate thinking, but he was developed as a starter. I think a lot of people think he's going to end up as a starter down the road. He's got a very resilient arm. He's been stretched this year, maybe with a little more stretching. Maybe he's your fourth or fifth starter. Maybe he really doesn't. He makes a strong addition out in that rotation, and a guy like Kimbrel is like two birds with one stone. I mentioned there's a lot to something like this. You have the luxury tax that you'd have to think of. You have the prospect cost that you have to think of. But the fact that he is under control for next year would, I think, maybe make the Phillies a little more willing to dip into the future a teeny bit. I mean, just for conversation's sake, would you think about Spencer Howard for Kimbrel? Just because I know we like Spencer, but he's spun his wheels. I think there are some people who have questions what he's going to be. Would you move Spencer Howard for a Craig Kimbrel when you know you have Craig Kimbrel next year? I certainly think it's something to think about, especially when you can maybe put Ranger Suarez in the rotation and have him help make the rotation better. The whole luxury tax issue, it's thorny. It's a significant issue, but maybe not a significant issue. The owner is on record as saying, they would exceed the luxury tax and pay the penalty for the right opportunity. I think Kimbrel might be the right opportunity because I think he can help you get to October. And I think it's really, really important that this team plays in October this year, because otherwise you're looking at a decade-long playoff drought, decade-long winning season drought. I think getting to the playoffs would mean a lot for this core nucleus and their development. It would mean a lot PR-wise. It would just mean a lot for the direction of the franchise. So that opportunity might right there suggest you go over the luxury tax, pay whatever small fine it'll be. And also coming up this offseason, we have a new CBA coming. There's going to be a new collective bargaining agreement. And the union is likely going to ask that the luxury tax, be reset, completely reset, in the new CBA. And one of the realities that makes the luxury tax so onerous is when you are a repeat offender. The penalties get higher, that you pay in a higher percentage. You can potentially even lose draft picks down the road. Well, if it's going to reset next year over the winter, like everybody thinks it will in a new CBA, that rollover is not in play. So you pay your small penalty this year if you go over and you move on. So judging by what Middleton has said, in the past, that for the right opportunity, he would go over it, they would go over it. I think the right opportunity might be there this month for them, next couple of weeks for them. But we'll see. I think he has a lot of trust in Dave Dombrowski. And if Dave Dombrowski feels it's the right move to make, I believe then John Middleton will fall back on his previous statements that if he feels like his baseball people think it's the right move to make, he'll go ahead and do it. So I apologize for my long-winded explanation on that, but Kimbrel's the guy that to me appeals the most, more than anybody.
His stuff is so much better than the other relievers that we've kind of talked about here. I mean, if you think about what the Phillies did last summer when they traded for Brandon Workman and Heath Hembry, or David Phelps for that matter, those are guys who came in with like short-term track records, but they didn't have elite stuff the way that Kimbrel does. And Kimbrel has been as dominant this season with the Cubs as he was at the beginning of his career with the Braves. You had mentioned that he struggled in 2019 and 2020. It's because he was walking everybody. He had 24 walks in 36 innings across those 2 years. He's cut that walk rate in half this year. And the number that stands out the most to me with Craig Kimbrel that explains his dominance, he's had 35 appearances this year. In 17 of them, he's retired every batter he's faced. I mean, that's how locked in he's been. And it's just that you're talking about like a different tier of reliever when it's Craig Kimbrel versus someone like Ian Kennedy or Kendall Graveman or, some of these other potential available back-end relievers. The other thing is that the Cubs have more players who could fit teams like the Phillies. Like Zach Davies, a starting pitcher, could be a potential option at the back of the rotation. Although with a guy like that, you're looking at something similar to what you have in Vince Velasquez and Matt Moore, and that he doesn't go deep into games. Obviously, Chris Bryant is there. People have talked a lot about Chris Bryant. I'm not convinced that the Phillies need to go make a push for him to play center field. They have Travis Jankowski, who's playing really well right now, and that's probably not going to last the rest of the season. But you have to ask yourself, like, the price tag for a half season of Chris Bryant, is it worth what you may be able to get out of him in the second half? The same would apply to other, rental type players. What do you think?
Well, like with Chris Bryant and Starling Marte, they're both rentals, as you mentioned. You only have them for the remainder of this year. And I love them both. It would be great to have them both out there and driving in runs. But what are you going to do for pitching? Pitching, you don't have enough pitching to get where you need to go. You might have enough offense. I just think they need to address the pitching. They only have so many bullets that they can trade out of this farm system. They have to be careful. You're not going to trade Abel. You're not going to trade the young pitcher you just drafted last week.
How about Alec Bohm?
Huh?
How about Alec Bohm? Do you think Alec Bohm could be in play over this next week?
I think anybody could be in play. Let's put it that way. If it's an upgrade and it makes sense for your organization, then. But I'm not trading Alec Bohm for a rental player. And I'm going to be careful trading Alec Bohm. I know he's had a really rough year at third base, but I think his future is probably at first base. I also think he has the talent to be a real foundation core offensive player on this team. And I know his strikeouts are up. He's had a tough time at times this year, but I just think he's smart enough and tough enough and has enough baseball aptitude to grow from this year of struggles. Failure is a great teacher. Struggles are a great teacher. And I think he's going to come out of this on the plus side. Maybe I'm wrong, but I still like the swing. I love that he doesn't try to kill the ball. I like that he works the middle of the field. And since June 1st, I think he's hitting 300. He's really getting better. We're seeing it right before our eyes. Okay, the power hasn't come. Well, if he hits 300, I guarantee you the power is going to come. Because when you square up that many balls at that size, some of them will go over the wall. So I'd be very, very leery to trade an Alec Bohm because I think he's going to be an important player here. He's young, he's learning, he's developing, he's getting better. This has been a really good investment year for him. And you're still, you still got a chance in the race, and I think he has a chance to impact the race and get better. He's been a survivor so far. I know it's been a tough year, so I'm not in a hurry to give up him. I would think long and hard before I give up an Alec Bohm. I think there's something there, especially offensively. But I'd also think long and hard about anybody for a rental player. Like I said, it'd be nice to get another bat in there, one of those marquee bats. But who's going to throw the ball over the dish? They need pitching. They need back end pitching at both spots, back end rotation, back end bullpen. And what do you think of the Kimbrel kills two birds with one stone idea? You move Ranger back to the rotation.
It's really intriguing, just a matter of would the Phillies be willing to do that with Suarez in the middle of the season when he's really kind of like, topped out at 3 innings or so?
Well, yeah, he has to, but he was stretched early, and maybe his first start is 3 innings. And maybe his second start is 3 innings. And then maybe you get him to 4 and you build him up. And if he's only a 5-inning guy, that's only what you're getting in those spots anyway.
True. Yeah.
But I understand that's why they get paid the big bucks to make those decisions. And do you want to start jerking the kid around? I'll tell you this: he's a just give me the ball guy. He doesn't think too much, which I like. He's one of these guys that pitching's pitching. Put the ball over the plate, put in the box in a good spot, and get the guy out. I don't think he's going to obsess and whine over a roll. He just wants to pitch and contribute. So, if he was a guy that had been groomed as a 1-inning blow and go guy, I would say absolutely not. But he's been groomed as a starter. He stretched it out earlier this year down at the alternate site, and then in AAA, he's given him a little bit of length at times in the bullpen. I mean, he gave him some length behind Spencer Howard a few times. I just think that he might be able to handle it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, starting pitching it might be equal to the need of bullpen help, because if you get into September and you're a game out of first place and you're really fighting to make the playoffs, and you have Matt Moore and Vince Velasquez going, for 40% of your cycle through the rotation. I know that Moore's pitched well since May 1st. I think he has a 3.24 ERA. Velasquez has pitched well against the Marlins, not so much against other teams this season. There's not going to be a high level of confidence in either of those guys down the stretch. And then, what happens if you suffer even one injury to a starting pitcher? Then you're dipping into the Chase Anderson or, Spencer Howard tier. So starting pitching is something that could certainly help the Phillies moving forward, even though we've talked mostly about the bullpen. The Phils, Jim, after going 10-4 in July and winning these 4 consecutive series, at baseballreference.com, they have playoff percentages, and they base it on strength of schedule and how a team has performed over its last 100 games. The Phillies now lead the NL East at 40.6%, a 40.6% chance to make the playoffs. The Mets are next at 25%. The Braves are next at 21%. The Nationals at 15%. I think it beyond the Phillies, it also speaks to what's going on in New York right now with the Mets. I mean, they had 2 ugly series against the Pirates. They salvaged it with a huge comeback on Sunday and then had another huge comeback on Monday. But beyond what's currently going on the field for the Mets, they just lost Jacob deGrom and Francisco Lindor, their most expensive pitcher and their most expensive hitter. deGrom has had 4 different injuries this season. They have to be kind of crossing their fingers that he's going to be able to make starts the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that. And they're a different team if he's not making a start every 5th day, because you're going to have a great chance to win that ball game. He's dominant, but guys like that give the whole roster. It's like in NASCAR, you draft off another car. Everybody drafts off Jacob deGrom. He gives the entire rotation, but he gives the whole team confidence, right? Because his start's going to be tomorrow, or he just pitched yesterday. Everybody feels good about themselves. So those guys have impact, I think, even beyond the day they pitch, and their absence has a profound impact on the negative side. So they're gonna miss him, and Lindor, who hasn't had a good season but can go off at any time and hit 350 in a month, and, have 10 doubles and do crazy things. He's out. So those are probably their 2 marquee talents. Big loss and potential difference maker in the division. I get a kick out of those percentages, and they're fun to look at. But the game is still not played on a computer screen. It's played on grass and dirt. And if the Phillies go 2-8 over these next 10 games, what's that percentage going to look like? So you have to take the players you have, and you still have to play well. And that's what the Phillies have done here in the month of July. They just need to continue it on this amazingly tough stretch of 10 games here. The 2 teams behind you and the Yankees, who are playing better.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at that page on Baseball Reference, they have the Phillies currently winning the division at 83 and 79, which is like just crazy. I mean, off the top of my head, the last team I can remember that won a division with that few wins was in 2006 when I think the Cardinals team that made it to the World Series. I think they only won 83 games that year. But you look around the rest of baseball, every other division, the team in first place is way, way over 500. The Phillies are still in this because nobody's run away with it. I think coming into the year, the expectation was that the Braves were just going to continue to steamroll in this division after they had won a couple in a row. But now they're also in a delicate spot after losing Ronald Acuna Jr. for the rest of the season to a torn ACL. NL East has just really been losing some star power. You can even add to that Kyle Schwarber, who was the hottest hitter in baseball for about a month before suffering that hamstring injury for the Nationals.
No question. It's like, the division, it's an ugly division race, right? For a lot of reasons, underperformance and injuries. Nobody's played well for an extended period of time, but I still find it interesting, because they're in it. I still think it can be entertaining, though it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. It's flawed, whatever you want to call it. It still can be entertaining. And I'm kind of riveted to see what's going to happen in New York these next two nights. And then when the Phillies come home for the final eight, I'm really eager to see what they do at the trade deadline. I'm eager to see what those other teams do, and Atlanta's case continues to do, because Anthopoulos, he just gets after it, man. He's already made deals. Do you agree that even though it's an ugly race, it can still be interesting and it still can be meaningful, I think, to play in October?
Yeah, I mean, think about what Phillies fans have dealt with the second half of seasons over the last decade. There's only been really 1 year, maybe 2 years at most, where the Phillies were even some semblance of in it after the All-Star break. It also is beneficial in that it's more difficult to gauge like a player's performance in the second half when there isn't that pressure. If you're in a race to win the division, what you see out of a guy like Connor Brogdon is more important. I'm just using him as an example, like a young player. What does this guy really have in him? It's easier to tell that when you're playing for a team that is, competing for the playoffs as opposed to 10, 15 games under 500.
Could not agree more. Playing in the crucible of a pennant race can be a terrific developmental tool. And we saw it with the 07 Phillies, and they were loaded with budding stars, either stars or budding stars. But they got their clock cleaned in the postseason in October. But they learned from the crucible of those games, and it really showed their winning know-how showed the next year and the year after that. So, yeah, playing meaningful games. That you mentioned, a guy like Brogdon. There's a lot there. There's a lot of talent there, and boy, if he could ever take that next step forward and find consistency, he could be a really good one. But yeah, playing in a pennant race would be really valuable for Alec Boehm. I've heard some folks even ask me, well, do you keep playing Torreyes or do you play Boehm when Boehm's back? And I will acknowledge and tip my hat to Torreyes. Boy, I mean, he can play on my team any day. He does so many things well. He's always prepared, makes an impact. He's a gamer. He's smart. But to me, he's a guy you want on your bench, and you filter him in there 4 or 5 times a week in different roles. Alec Boehm, you're trying to develop an all-star. And he's got all-star tools. Once maybe he gets over to first base or wherever he's going to land and gets more comfortable in his defense, he's got all-star offensive tools. And the development in a pennant race, or the development time that he'll get in a pennant race, I think is going to be valuable. So to me, he needs to be on the field for the present, because I still think he can help you right now, and also for the future, because it would be a terrific development experience for him.
We spent way more time this season than I think anybody anticipated talking about Ronald Torreyes, but it's just because when the guy's in the game, he does something well. And whether it's coming up with an unlikely hit or just playing such solid defense, he's just a winning type of player. And, I do think that Torreyes and Travis Jankowski, the more they play, the more they're going to regress to like their true talent level. Jankowski's hitting 375, for example, through 60 plate appearances. But the Phillies have really needed those two guys. And another guy who they may not have been counting on too much this season going into the year that's been really good lately is Bailey Falter, the left-hander. He has 21 strikeouts and 1 walk in 18 innings at the major league level. He came in on Sunday, got the biggest out of the game. JT Realmuto referred to it as such, afterward. He came in and he struck out Monte Harrison of the Marlins with the bases loaded and 2 outs to end what was Miami's final threat. And I was sitting next to Ruben Amaro Jr. in the press box, and he makes a comment like, it must look like 98 facing this guy, even though it's 92, 93, because of that crazy extension that he gets. This is a pretty interesting piece for the Phillies moving forward, who could fill a variety of different roles.
Yeah, you mentioned that extension. When they put him on the 40-man roster in November, that was a big reason why. I mean, he was coming off a shutdown last year, really didn't pitch. I think they got to look at him in instructional league. He might have come in instructional league, and he doesn't have the biggest fastball on the roster, but because of his, what's he, about 6'5", 6'6", and the way he comes down that slope and extends, he looks like he's right on top of you, and the fastball is right on top of you. So yeah, they love his extension and what he gets, and even beyond the mechanics and what he's doing, man, he the intangibles to come into some of the situations as a rookie and deliver the way he has, and he's shown to me a lot of guts and the ability to stay cool in big situations, and sometimes that's half the battle. To pitch in late in the game for a young guy, you come in late in the game, it's like traffic's moving a million miles an hour, and he just seems like, for a relatively inexperienced major league pitcher, he has a pretty good knack for slowing things down and staying in control. So he's been a nice find out there for them.
Okay, well, Phillies-Yankees, a brief 2-game series at Yankee Stadium, followed by those 8 crucial home games, 2 4-game series against the Braves and Nationals, and that leads the Phillies right into the trade deadline, which is July 30th this year. So enjoy the week of baseball, everybody. We will talk to you on Friday.